I stood on my son's porch in Los Angeles, overnight bag in hand, staring at the locked door with growing confusion. David and his wife Tracy had invited me. They'd called 2 weeks ago, insisting I make the 6-hour drive from Phoenix. First visit in 2 years. I knocked again. Nothing. The silence felt wrong. Then I heard running footsteps. A man in his 40s sprinted across the lawn, arms waving frantically. He grabbed my shoulder, eyes wild with panic. "Run away before it's too late," he shouted. "They're terrible people." My blood turned cold. The man was breathing hard, practically shaking as he pulled me away from the front door. He kept glancing back at the house like something might burst through the windows at any moment. "I'm Greg Patterson," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I live 3 houses down. You need to listen to me. Your son and his wife, they're not who you think they are." I felt my stomach tighten. "What are you talking about?" "I'm Bennett, David's father. He invited me here. We planned this visit." Greg's face went pale. His grip on my arm loosened. "Oh God, you're his father?" He looked like he might be sick. "Sir, I'm so sorry, but you need to know the truth. David and Tracy have been running scams in this neighborhood for the past 18 months. They target elderly people, gain their trust, then steal their money through fake investment schemes." The words hit me like physical blows. I wanted to defend my son, to tell this stranger he was mistaken, but something in Greg's desperate sincerity stopped me. "My father," Greg continued, his voice cracking. "Walter Patterson. He's 78 years old, lost his wife 3 years ago. David and Tracy befriended him at the community garden. They seemed so kind, so interested in his stories. They convinced him to invest $43,000 in what they called a senior living development project. It was completely fake, every dollar gone. I felt the porch beneath my feet tilt. $43,000. That was someone's life savings, someone's security. "There are others," Greg said. "Dorothy Brennan down the street. She's 81. Lost $32,000. The Washingtons, a retired couple, lost $56,000 from their medical emergency fund. Mr. Washington has Parkinson's disease. They're struggling to afford his medications now." My mind raced back through the past 2 years. David's excuses for not visiting, his vague explanations about his marketing consultant work, the expensive house in this upscale neighborhood, Tracy's designer clothes in the photos they'd posted online. I'd been proud, thinking my son had finally made it. "The police are investigating," Greg said. "But David and Tracy are smart. They set up legitimate-looking business entities, create professional contracts, make everything appear legal on the surface. It's been hard to build a case." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my voice barely steady. Greg pulled out his phone. "Because this morning, before sunrise, I saw them loading suitcases into their car. They told another neighbor they were going on vacation, but I think they're running. The investigation is closing in." He hesitated, then added, "And because you're here, you came to visit. I couldn't let them do to you what they did to my father." "Do to me?" The implication settled over me like ice water. Greg's finger trembled as he scrolled through his phone. 2 weeks ago, I was working in my yard. David and Tracy were in their backyard. Didn't know I was close enough to hear. I recorded this. I probably shouldn't have, but after what they did to my dad, I wanted evidence. He pressed play. David's voice came through clearly, laughing. "My old man would never suspect anything. He's too trusting. If we need another cash infusion, I'll invite him out here and work the same angle. He's got that retirement fund just sitting there. Easy money." Tracy's voice responded, equally casual. "How much does he have?" "Close to 90,000, last I checked. Enough to keep us comfortable while we plan the next move." The recording ended. I stood there, unable to process what I'd just heard. My son, my David. The boy I'd taught to ride a bike, helped with homework, sent to college. He was planning to steal from me. Not just steal, but deliberately manipulate me, his own father, to get my retirement savings. Greg watched my face. I'm sorry. I know this is horrible to hear, but you needed to know before you went inside that house. I looked at the locked door, at the welcome mat that now seemed like a cruel joke. He invited me here, I said slowly. The phone call 2 weeks ago. He said he missed me, that Tracy wanted to get to know me better, that it had been too long. It was the setup, Greg said quietly. I've seen them do it. They're patient. They build trust first, make you feel special, wanted. Then comes the investment opportunity. It always sounds perfect, tailored exactly to what you care about. My hands were shaking. I'd driven 6 hours thinking I was reconnecting with my son. Instead, I was walking into a trap. My own child was planning to rob me blind. Where are they now? I asked. I don't know. They left around 5 this morning, haven't come back. I pulled out my phone and called David's number. It went straight to voicemail. I tried Tracy's, same thing. Both phones off. Greg shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Bennett, there's something else. The police detective handling the case. Her name is Sarah Thornton. She's been trying to get victims to come forward, but most are too embarrassed. My dad wouldn't even file an official complaint at first. He felt foolish. But this evidence you're standing in front of, your son's own house, the files that might be inside, it could help everyone. I looked at this stranger, who'd run across his lawn to warn me, who'd shared his family's painful story to protect me. You said the police are investigating. Have they searched the house? They need more evidence for a warrant. David and Tracy have been careful. A thought occurred to me. Do you know if they have a spare key hidden anywhere? Greg glanced around, then nodded slowly. There's a fake rock by the garden. I've seen Tracy use it when she locks herself out. I made a decision. My son had invited me here. I was his father. If he'd wanted privacy, he shouldn't have given me the address and told me to come visit. Show me. The spare key was exactly where Greg said it would be, tucked inside a hollow rock that looked nothing like the real stones around it. My hand shook as I unlocked the front door. Inside, the house was chaos. Half-packed boxes sat in the living room. Closet doors stood open, hangers scattered on the floor. They'd left in a hurry, that much was clear. Should we be doing this? Greg asked from the doorway. My son invited me to his home, I said, my voice hard. I'm his father. I have every right to be here. The living room looked normal enough at first glance. Expensive furniture, large television, professional family photos on the walls. David and Tracy smiling in front of various landmarks. All of it bought with stolen money, I now realized. I walked to the home office. The door was ajar. Inside, file cabinets stood open, papers scattered across the desk. They'd been sorting through documents, deciding what to take and what to leave behind. I started reading. The first folder contained information on Walter Patterson, Greg's father. There were copies of bank statements, a detailed profile with notes about his wife's death, his hobbies, his vulnerabilities. Lonely, one note read. Needs purpose. Target with community investment angle. My stomach turned. This was predatory, calculated, cold. The next folder was Dorothy Brennan. Notes described her as a widow, emotionally vulnerable, wants to honor late husband's memory. Use scholarship fund approach. There were copies of the fake contracts, the professional-looking business proposals, everything designed to look legitimate. I kept searching, finding folder after folder. Each one represented a person, a victim, a life disrupted. The Washingtons, a couple named the Hendersons. Names I didn't recognize but whose pain I could imagine. Then I found it. A folder, labeled Dad, Phase 2. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were printouts of my bank statements. How had David gotten these? Had he stolen them during his last visit to Phoenix 3 years ago? Or had he somehow accessed them online? The numbers were highlighted. My retirement account, $87,312. My checking account balance, my monthly Social Security deposit amount. Everything laid out like a blueprint for theft. Beneath the statements was a drafted investment proposal. Bennett's Small Business Legacy Fund. It was titled. The description was carefully crafted to appeal to everything I cared about: supporting local Phoenix businesses, creating jobs, honoring my late wife Martha's memory by helping others build family enterprises. It was perfect. If David had shown me this, I would have been moved. I would have trusted him completely. I would have handed over my money without hesitation. There was even a script, handwritten notes in David's handwriting. Remember to mention Mom naturally. Don't force it. Use the grandkid's angle if he hesitates. Talk about legacy. If he wants to think about it, create urgency. Mention limited investment window. Grandkids angle. There were no grandkids. Tracy had called me a year ago, crying, saying she was pregnant. I'd sent $2,000 for baby supplies. She'd called 2 months later, voice sad, saying they'd lost the pregnancy. I'd grieved for a grandchild who never existed. It had all been a lie to extract money. I sat down hard in David's desk chair. Greg stood in the doorway, reading over my shoulder. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "My wife, Martha," I said, my voice hollow. "She died 3 years ago. Cancer." David barely came to the funeral, stayed 2 days, said he had important work meetings, left before the burial. I thought he was struggling with grief in his own way. Now I understand he was already doing this. Already stealing from people. Too busy running scams to mourn his own mother. Greg pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Detective Thornton. She needs to see this." While Greg made the call, I continued searching. The computer was still on, logged into David's email. I knew I shouldn't look, but I couldn't stop myself. The recent emails painted a clear picture. David and Tracy had been planning their escape for weeks. Flight confirmations to Mexico City. Research on countries without extradition treaties. Instructions for accessing offshore bank accounts. But one email chain made my blood run cold. It was correspondence with someone identified only as Jay Morrison. The subject line, Phoenix Expansion. I clicked it open and read. David was discussing expanding operations to Phoenix and Tucson. The key is establishing trust through existing networks, David had written. My father has lived in his retirement community for 15 years. Everyone knows him, trusts him. If we position the investment opportunity correctly, use his reputation as the entry point, we could clear $500,000 easily. These people gather for church, community events, card games. Word of mouth spreads fast in those environments. One trusted referral, and the rest follow. Jay Morrison had responded. "Your father agrees to front the operation?" David's reply, "He doesn't need to know he's fronting it. We use his name, his connections, his reputation. By the time anyone realizes what happened, we're gone. The beauty is, he's so honest and trusting. He'll never suspect until it's too late. Might even defend us initially, which buys more time." I couldn't breathe. David wasn't just planning to steal from me. He was planning to use me as a weapon to destroy my entire community. My friends, my neighbors, people who'd supported me through Martha's death, who played cards with me every Thursday, who sat beside me in church every Sunday. David was going to turn me into the unwitting bait that lured them all into financial ruin. The scale of the betrayal was staggering. This wasn't just a son stealing from his father. This was systematic, calculated destruction. Detective Thornton arrived 40 minutes later. She was a woman in her early 50s, sharp eyes, professional demeanor. Greg had clearly briefed her on the phone because she walked straight to the office. "Mr. Bennett," she said, extending her hand. "I'm very sorry you're discovering all this. How long have you been investigating my son?" I asked. 8 months. Officially. We've had suspicions longer, but building a case has been difficult. Your son is sophisticated. Everything appears legal on the surface. The victims have been reluctant to press charges, many feeling too embarrassed. I showed her everything. The files, the computer, the dad, phase, 2-folder, the email chain about Phoenix. Her expression hardened as she read. "This is the breakthrough we needed. Do I have your permission to seize these materials as evidence?" "Take it all," I said. "Take everything." She called for backup. 2 other officers arrived with evidence bags and cameras. They photographed everything, cataloged every file, copied the computer hard drive. "Where are David and Tracy now?" I asked. Detective Thornton checked her phone. "We've been monitoring their movements. They flew to Mexico City this morning. 5:30 a.m. flight. We're coordinating with Mexican authorities, but it's complicated. They haven't technically violated any international laws yet." "Yet," I repeated. "But they've violated plenty of laws here." "Absolutely. Wire fraud, elder abuse, theft by deception, conspiracy. With this evidence, we can file formal charges. The question is apprehension and extradition." Greg's father, Walter, arrived, while the police were still processing evidence. He was a small man, thin, with sad eyes that brightened slightly when he saw the police activity. "Is it true?" Walter asked Greg. "They finally have enough evidence?" "Thanks to Mr. Bennett," Greg said. Walter turned to me, and I saw recognition dawn. "You're David's father. He talked about you. Said you were retired in Phoenix, living comfortably." His voice held no accusation, only weary understanding. "I'm sorry. You must be devastated." "I'm sorry for what my son did to you," I said. "To everyone." Walter shook his head. "You didn't do this." He did, but I couldn't shake the feeling that somehow I'd failed. Failed to raise him right. Failed to see what he'd become. Failed to protect the people he'd hurt. Detective Thornton finished her work and approached me. "Mr. Bennett, I need to ask. Are you willing to testify against your son if this goes to trial?" I didn't hesitate to. "Yes, it won't be easy. Defense attorneys will try to discredit you, claim you're a disgruntled parent, suggest family disputes. I don't care what they claim. Those people deserve justice. If testifying helps achieve that, I'll do it." She nodded with respect. "One more thing. We found encrypted files on the computer. I'm having our tech specialist work on accessing them. There might be more victims we don't know about." More victims. How many lives had David destroyed? How many families? I stayed in Los Angeles that night, but not at David's house. Greg insisted I stay with him and Walter. We sat in Greg's kitchen drinking coffee, none of us able to sleep, sharing stories about the people we'd lost to David's greed. Not lost to death, but lost to betrayal. And somehow that felt worse, because the loss was deliberate. Detective Thornton called the next morning. Her voice was tense. "Mr. Bennett, we cracked the encrypted files. You need to come down to the station." An hour later, I sat in a conference room at the Los Angeles Police Department, looking at a screen that displayed David's hidden records. What I saw made the previous day's discoveries seem small. 6 additional victims in San Diego, Detective Thornton explained, pointing to spreadsheets. We had no idea about these. David and Tracy were running parallel operations. Different names, different business entities, but the same basic scheme. The San Diego victims had lost a combined $120,000. An elderly man named Frank Cortez lost $48,000. A widow named Helen Stiles lost $39,000. 2 other couples, the Rodriguezes and the Campbells, lost the rest. "We're contacting San Diego police now," Detective Thornton said, "but there's something else you need to see." She pulled up another file. "The Phoenix operation. It's more developed than we thought." On the screen appeared a detailed map of my retirement community. Every house was marked with a resident's name, but 47 homes had additional color coding and detailed notes. I leaned forward, reading. My neighbor, Carl Thompson, widower, 72, 40,000 in savings, interested in veteran causes. My friend Susan Perry, recent retiree, 68, sold business last year. Approximately 150,000 liquid assets, passionate about animal welfare. My church friend Robert Hayes, 75, wife has dementia, desperate to afford better care, owns home outright, good candidate for reverse mortgage scheme. They'd researched everyone, not just financial information, but personal details, health issues, family situations, fears and hopes and vulnerabilities. How did David get all this information? I asked. though I already suspected the answer. Detective Thornton pulled up another screen. He joined your church's online prayer group under the name Daniel Bradford, posed as a younger member caring for his aging parents. People shared freely, asking for prayers about medical bills, family struggles, financial stress. He took notes on everything. I felt sick. Our prayer group was sacred. People shared their deepest worries there, trusting they were among friends. David had infiltrated that trust and weaponized it. He also accessed your email, Detective Thornton continued. We found spyware on your home computer. He installed it during his last visit 3 years ago. He's been reading your emails ever since. Every conversation you've had, every piece of information shared with you, he had access to it all. 3 years. For 3 years, David had been inside my digital life, harvesting information about everyone I knew. There's a timeline here, she said, pulling up another document. David planned to return to Phoenix with you after this visit. He'd stay a few weeks, meet your friends, attend your church, establish himself in the community. Then he'd launch the investment scheme. Based on his projections, he estimated he could extract $450,000 over 6 months before people caught on. $450,000 from my friends, my community, people who trusted me. The particularly cruel part, Detective Thornton said quietly, is this note here. She pointed to a highlighted section. He planned to make sure you were the last to find out. Keep you convinced everything was legitimate, so you'd continue vouching for him even as people started losing money. By the time you realized what happened, he'd be gone, and you'd be left holding the blame. The psychological torture of that plan was staggering. David would have destroyed my reputation, my relationships, my standing in the community I'd called home for 15 years. I would have become the man who brought a con artist into their midst, whose trust everyone else had relied on. Can we stop this? I asked. Warn people in Phoenix? We're ahead of him now, Detective Thornton assured me. And with him in Mexico, he can't execute the plan. But yes, you should warn your community. The more people who know his tactics, the harder it becomes for him or others like him to operate. Over the next few days, the case expanded rapidly. The San Diego victims came forward once they learned they weren't alone. Detective Thornton coordinated with multiple jurisdictions. The district attorney's office got involved, recognizing this as a significant elder fraud case that could set precedents. I met more victims. Dorothy Brennan, the 81-year-old widow who'd lost $32,000. She lived in a small apartment now, having sold her house to pay debts David's theft had created. He came to my grief support group, Dorothy told me, her voice shaky, right after my husband died. He and Tracy seemed so kind. They asked about Harold, my husband, really listened to my stories. Tracy even cried with me. It felt like I'd found friends who understood. The investment opportunity came about 3 months later, she continued. They said they were creating scholarship funds named after ordinary people who'd lived extraordinary lives. Harold was a teacher for 40 years. The idea of a scholarship in his name, helping students, it meant everything to me. They showed me professional brochures, testimonials from other families. I never suspected. I listened to story after story. The Washingtons, who'd lost $56,000 from their medical fund. Mrs. Washington had worked as a nurse for 35 years. Mr. Washington had been a firefighter. They'd saved carefully, planning for his Parkinson's disease progression. David's theft meant Mr. Washington now rationed his medication, skipping doses to make bottles last longer. He's trembling more, Mrs. Washington said, her eyes wet. I see him struggle to button his shirt. We can't afford the better medications anymore, the ones that really help. She looked at me. Your son did this. I'm sorry to say it so bluntly, but he did this to us. I know, I said. And I'm sorry isn't enough, but it's all I have. Walter, Greg's father, had become quiet and withdrawn after losing his money. He'd stopped going to the community garden where he'd met David and Tracy, stopped attending the senior center. He'd felt too ashamed, too foolish. I was lonely, Walter told me one evening at Greg's house. After my wife died, the days were so empty. David seemed genuinely interested in my stories. He'd ask about my Navy service, my career as an engineer. Tracy would bring cookies and sit for hours listening. I thought I'd found friends. When they mentioned the investment opportunity, the senior living development project, I didn't just see it as making money. I saw it as being part of something meaningful, creating housing for people like me. He paused, wiping his eyes. The money's gone. That hurts. But worse is feeling like a fool. Knowing I was targeted because I was lonely, that they studied me, figured out my weaknesses, and exploited them. I understood that pain intimately. The shame wasn't just about losing money. It was about having your trust betrayed, your vulnerabilities used against you, your basic human need for connection turned into a weapon. Detective Thornton kept me updated on David and Tracy's movements. They'd checked into a hotel in Mexico City, seemingly unaware that authorities were tracking them. They visited banks, presumably accessing hidden accounts. They researched flights to Costa Rica. "We're coordinating extradition," Detective Thornton said. "Mexican authorities are cooperative. It's just a matter of paperwork and timing." Then came the anonymous email. It arrived at Detective Thornton's department email address late one evening. The sender was encrypted, untraceable, but the contents were explosive. The email contained bank account numbers, current locations, detailed travel plans, and information about offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Someone had handed them everything needed to apprehend David and Tracy and freeze their assets. "Who sent this?" I asked. When Detective Thornton showed me, "We don't know. Someone with sophisticated technical skills who wanted to help. Could be an accomplice who grew a conscience. Could be someone else David wronged that we don't know about. Regardless, the information checks out. It's accurate." The offshore accounts contained $370,000. Not all the money stolen, but a substantial portion. Forensic accountants believed more might be hidden elsewhere, but this was a solid recovery point. Detective Thornton worked quickly. Within hours, international law enforcement was coordinated. The Cayman accounts were frozen. Mexican authorities were given David and Tracy's exact location. "This happens tomorrow," she told me. "They'll be arrested and extradited. Are you prepared for what comes next?" I wasn't sure I was prepared for anything anymore, but I nodded anyway. The arrest happened at dawn. Mexican federal police entered David and Tracy's hotel room while they slept. No dramatic chase, no resistance. Just two people in their pajamas, suddenly in handcuffs, their escape fantasy shattered. I watched the news coverage that evening. My son, face covered with a jacket, being led through an airport. Tracy crying, shouting something about being innocent. The reporter mentioned elder fraud. Multiple victims. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. My phone rang constantly. Friends from Phoenix who'd seen the news. Former colleagues. People from church. Everyone shocked, concerned, asking if I was okay. I wasn't okay, but I was determined. The morning after David's arrest, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to let shame silence me or the other victims. I was going to fight back. Detective Thornton had warned me that getting emotionally involved could complicate the case, but this was already as personal as it could get. My son had planned to destroy my community. He'd used my name, my reputation, my relationships as tools for theft. I had a responsibility to stop him, not just legally but morally. I started by visiting every victim I could find. First was Walter. I drove to his small apartment, the one he'd moved into after losing his house because of David's theft. Walter opened the door cautiously. When he saw me, his expression shifted from suspicion to resignation. "Mr. Bennett," he said. "Come in." His apartment was sparse but clean. Furniture that had clearly been moved from a larger home, now crowded into a small space. Photos on the walls of his late wife, of Greg as a child, of a life that had been fuller. "I need to tell you something," I said. "I was almost your neighbor in victimhood. David planned to steal from me too. I found evidence in his house, a whole folder dedicated to scamming me out of my retirement savings. Walter stared at me. Your own son was going to rob you? Not just rob me. Use me to rob everyone I know in Phoenix. 47 people he'd researched. My friends, my church members, my neighbors. He was going to use my reputation as the gateway to steal from all of them. Walter sat down slowly. Why are you telling me this? Because you feel foolish, don't you? Ashamed that you were tricked. Like somehow you should have known better. He nodded, not meeting my eyes. I'm David's father, I said. I raised him. If anyone should feel ashamed, it's me. But I've realized something. Our shame is exactly what people like David count on. It's what keeps victims silent. It's what allows con artists to move on to the next target without consequences. We take away their power by refusing to be ashamed. Walter looked up. What are you proposing? I want to organize the victims. All of us. Come together, share our stories, support each other. And I want to go public. Talk to the media. Make sure David's actions are exposed so thoroughly that he can never do this again. And so other potential victims learn the warning signs. People will judge us, Walter said quietly. They'll say we were stupid, gullible. Some will, I agreed. But more will understand. Because the truth is, we weren't stupid. We were human. We trusted people who seemed trustworthy. We believed in opportunities that looked legitimate. The failure isn't ours. It's David's. And I'm tired of letting him control the narrative. Walter was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, What do you need from me? Over the next week, I visited every victim I could reach. Dorothy Brennan was next. She lived in a tiny studio apartment, a dramatic downsize from the home she'd sold. I lost everything because I wanted to honor my husband's memory, Dorothy said, serving me tea in mismatched cups, clearly from different sets. Harold was a teacher. The idea of a scholarship in his name, it felt like his legacy would continue. How do I forgive myself for being so naive? You weren't naive, I said firmly. You were grieving and hopeful. Those are beautiful qualities. David exploited them. That's evil. But your hope, your desire to honor your husband, that's love. Don't let David's evil corrupt your love. Tears rolled down Dorothy's face. Do you really believe we can do something about this? I believe we have to try. The Washingtons were harder to reach. Mrs. Washington was protective, wary of letting anyone near her husband. His Parkinson's tremors were worse, she said through the door. He wasn't up for visitors. I'm not here to cause more pain, I called through the door. I'm here because my son caused your pain, and I want to help stop him from hurting anyone else. The door opened. Mrs. Washington looked exhausted, angry, grief-stricken. Your son destroyed our retirement. My husband worked 30 years as a firefighter. Do you know what that does to a body? He saved people. And now we can't afford his medication because your son stole our medical fund. I know, I said. And I can't give you back what David took. But I can fight to make sure he pays for it. I can work to recover what funds exist. And I can make sure his crimes are public, so no one else falls victim. But I need your help. I need all the victims to stand together. Mr. Washington appeared behind his wife, moving slowly, trembling hands gripping a walker. What do you want from us? I want to organize a meeting. Everyone David and Tracy hurt. I want us to coordinate with the police, share our stories with media, and create a support network, so none of us face this alone. Why would anyone listen to us? Mrs. Washington asked bitterly. We're just old people who got scammed. That's exactly why they'll listen, I said. Because this isn't just our story. It's happening everywhere. Elder fraud is an epidemic, but it stays hidden because victims are ashamed. We can change that. Mr. Washington nodded slowly. When's the meeting? I organized it for the following Saturday at Greg's house. Greg cleared his living room, set up folding chairs, prepared coffee and snacks. Walter helped, his energy returning as he felt purpose again. 8 victims showed up. Walter, Dorothy, The Washingtons. Two San Diego victims who'd driven up, Frank Cortez and Helen Stiles. And two I hadn't met before, a couple named the Jennings who'd lost $28,000. We sat in a circle. The atmosphere was heavy with shame and pain. I started by introducing myself. My name is Bennett. I'm 67 years old. I'm a retired accountant from Phoenix. And I'm David's father. Everyone looked at me with varying expressions of surprise, anger, pity. I drove here last week thinking I was visiting my son, I continued. Instead, I discovered he'd planned to steal my retirement savings and use me to scam everyone I know back home. My son is a criminal. He targeted vulnerable people, exploited their trust, and stole their security. And if anyone should feel ashamed, it's me. I raised him. You didn't make him do this, Dorothy said softly. No, but I gave him life. I taught him right from wrong. At least I tried to. Somewhere, somehow, that failed. But I'm not here to wallow in guilt. I'm here because hiding our pain gives power to people like David. Standing together takes it away. I looked around the circle. Each of you lost money. But you also lost dignity, trust, peace of mind. You've been isolated by shame. I want to change that. I want us to work together with the police, talk to the media, and create a support network. Make David's crimes so public, so exposed, that he can never do this again. Frank Cortez, a solid man in his 70s with sad eyes, spoke up. The media will make us look like fools. They'll focus on how we got tricked. Some will, I admitted. But if we control the narrative, if we speak honestly about how sophisticated these scams are, we can educate people instead of just becoming cautionary tales. Helen Stiles, a tiny woman with fierce eyes, said, I'm in. I've been hiding for 6 months. I'm done hiding. The Washingtons looked at each other. Mr. Washington's hands shook on his walker, but his voice was steady. Our grandchildren need to see us fight back. They need to know we're not victims. We're survivors. One by one, everyone agreed. We would stand together. Then my phone rang. The caller ID showed David's number. My stomach clenched. It's him, I said. Everyone went silent. I answered on speaker. David. Hey, Dad. His voice was casual, almost friendly, like nothing had happened. Sorry I missed you last week. Emergency business trip came up. We're in Mexico for a few days. When we get back, we'll reschedule your visit. The audacity was breathtaking. He'd been arrested, released on bail pending extradition hearings, and was pretending everything was normal. I'm in your house, David, I said calmly. I found everything. Silence. Long, cold silence. I found the files, I continued. The victims, the offshore accounts, the Phoenix operation, all of it. When David spoke again, his voice was completely different. Cold, flat, threatening. You don't want to make this public, Dad. Think about how it'll look. The father who raised a con artist. Everyone will wonder what kind of parent you were. Your reputation in Phoenix will be destroyed. People will question your judgment, your values. Just walk away. Pretend you never saw anything. It's better for everyone. Around me, the victims stared at the phone, listening to my son threaten me. No, David, I said. What's better for everyone is making sure you never hurt anyone else again. You'll regret this, David said, and the line went dead. I looked around the circle. Everyone had heard it. The manipulation, the threats, the complete lack of remorse. Dorothy was crying. He has no soul. How does someone become that? I don't know, I said honestly. But he just confirmed what we're doing is right. He's afraid of exposure. That means exposure is our strongest weapon. Walter stood up. Let's plan this properly. What do we do first? We spent the next 3 hours organizing. Detective Thornton had given me her card. I'd call her, coordinate our effort with the official investigation. We'd compile written statements from each victim. We'd contact local media. I'd also create something else. A database of warning signs, common tactics, red flags to watch for. We'd share it with senior centers, churches, community groups. Turn our painful lessons into protective knowledge for others. As the meeting ended and people prepared to leave, Helen Stiles pulled me aside. "You could have hidden," she said. "You're his father. No one would blame you for staying silent." "Yes, they would," I said. "I would. And more importantly, staying silent would mean accepting that David can continue destroying lives. I can't live with that." She squeezed my hand. "Your son may be terrible, but you're a good man." I wasn't sure I believed that yet, but I was trying to be. The next morning I called Detective Thornton. "I've organized the victims. We're ready to cooperate fully, and we want to go public." "Public how?" she asked cautiously. "Media. News coverage. We want to expose David's operation completely and warn other potential victims." There was a pause. "Mr. Bennett, are you sure? Media attention can be invasive. Defense attorneys will use any publicity against us, claim we've biased potential jurors." "I'm sure," I said. "These people have been hiding in shame for months. Going public is part of their healing, and if it helps prevent even one more person from being victimized, it's worth it." She sighed. "All right, but let me coordinate with the district attorney's office first. We need to make sure we don't compromise the prosecution." 2 days later, Detective Thornton called back with approval. The DA's office sees the value in public awareness. They've agreed to cooperate with media outreach, with some conditions. No details about ongoing investigative techniques. No speculation about evidence we haven't verified. I contacted a local Los Angeles news station. A reporter named Angela Torres specialized in consumer protection and elder fraud stories. She was immediately interested. "This is exactly the kind of story that needs telling," Angela said when we met. "Elder fraud costs Americans billions every year, but it stays hidden because victims are embarrassed. If you and the others are willing to speak publicly, this could really make a difference." We arranged interviews at Greg's house. Angela brought a camera crew. One by one, victims shared their stories. Walter spoke first, his voice stronger than I'd heard it. "My name is Walter Patterson. I'm 78 years old. I lost $43,000 to David Bennett and his wife Tracy. They targeted me after my wife died. They studied my loneliness and exploited it. I'm speaking publicly today because hiding gives criminals power. I'm not ashamed anymore. I'm angry, and I want justice." Dorothy was next. "My name is Dorothy Brennan. I'm 81. I lost $32,000 that I'd saved for 30 years. They promised to create a scholarship in my late husband's name. It was all lies, but I won't be silent anymore." The Washingtons spoke together, Mr. Washington's trembling hands visible on camera. "We're the Washingtons. We lost $56,000 from our medical fund. My husband has Parkinson's disease. We're now rationing his medication because we can't afford proper treatment. David and Tracy Bennett did this to us. They need to be stopped." When it was my turn, I looked directly at the camera. "My name is Bennett. I'm David Bennett's father. I came to Los Angeles last week thinking I was visiting my son. Instead, I discovered he'd been running criminal scams, targeting elderly victims. I found evidence that he was planning to steal from me too, and use me to scam my entire community in Phoenix. I'm speaking today because my son needs to face consequences, and because other families need to know the warning signs." Angela asked probing questions. "How did the scams work? What were the red flags? How did David and Tracy gain trust?" I explained, using my accounting background to break down the financial manipulation. They created legitimate-looking business entities. They registered with the state, set up professional websites, created polished marketing materials. Everything appeared real. They targeted people through community connections, through places where elderly people gather and trust each other. Churches, senior centers, grief support groups. They were patient, Walter added. They spent months building friendships before ever mentioning investments. By the time the opportunity came up, we already trusted them completely. Angela turned to me. As his father, how do you process this? I took a breath. It's devastating. I raised David to have values, integrity, compassion. Somewhere he chose a different path. I grieve for the son I thought I had. But more importantly, I'm committed to helping his victims and preventing future ones. The interview aired 2 days later as a special segment titled Local Family Torn Apart by Elder Fraud Scheme. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Detective Thornton called. We've received 17 new tips since your story aired. 7 more potential victims from other areas. 3 people reporting similar scams by different operators. This is making an impact. My phone exploded with messages. Friends from Phoenix expressing shock and support. Former colleagues offering help. My church organized a special service for fraud victims, inviting speakers from law enforcement and victim services. But most significantly, other victims started coming forward. People who'd been scammed by David and Tracy, but had been too ashamed to report it. A man from Pasadena called. He'd lost $19,000 2 years ago, before David moved to the current neighborhood. He'd never filed a police report, too embarrassed. A woman from Santa Monica reached out. $24,000 gone, stolen through a fake charity scheme. The total kept growing. Detective Thornton worked to verify each claim, cross-referencing dates and methods with known patterns. Every verified victim strengthened the case against David. The district attorney's office, energized by media attention and community pressure, assembled a task force. Multiple charges were being prepared. 14 counts of elder fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, wire fraud, identity theft. Meanwhile, I used my accounting skills to help trace the money. David had created 4 shell companies with names that sounded trustworthy. Golden Years Investment Partners, Legacy Planning Solutions, Senior Security Consultants, and Heritage Trust Management. Each company had a registered business address that turned out to be a mailbox service. Each had a professional website that has since been taken down. Each had fake testimonials from satisfied clients. Money moved between the companies in complex patterns designed to obscure the trail. David would collect investments through one company, transfer funds to another for processing, then move money again to a third company for portfolio management. By the time victims realized something was wrong, the money had bounced through so many accounts that recovering it seemed impossible. But Detective Thornton's forensic accountants were skilled. They traced every transfer, identifying which accounts were still active and where money might be hidden. We're going to recover some funds, Detective Thornton told me during one of our coordination meetings. Not all of it, probably not even most of it. David spent a lot and hid the rest well, but we'll get something back to victims. That hope meant everything. Not just the money itself, but the principle, the idea that crime wouldn't pay, that justice could partially repair the damage. The victim support group I'd organized continued meeting weekly. What had started as 8 people had grown to 23 as more victims came forward. We shared resources, legal updates, emotional support. I created the warning materials I'd promised. A detailed guide on recognizing elder fraud, common tactics, red flags, questions to ask before investing, resources for reporting suspected scams. We printed 500 copies and distributed them to every senior center, church, and community group we could reach in the Los Angeles area. I mailed copies to organizations in Phoenix, San Diego, and other cities. The guide was specific and practical. It included David's actual tactics as case studies, stripped of identifying details but showing the progression of manipulation. The scammer attends your grief support group, befriending you during your most vulnerable time. 3 months later, they mention an investment opportunity that honors your late spouse's memory. They show professional materials, offer references that check out, and give you time to think. When you agree, they process your check through a legitimate-looking business. 6 months later, the business has disappeared, and your money is gone. By breaking down the methodology, we hope to help people recognize the patterns before becoming victims, 3 weeks after the news story aired, something unexpected happened. I received an anonymous email. The sender had used encryption software, making them untraceable, but the content was explosive. The email contained detailed information about David and Tracy's current location in Mexico City, their daily routines, the hotel where they were staying, and most importantly, specific account numbers and access codes for offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. "Why am I sending this?" the email read. "Because I was part of the operation until I realized we were destroying lives. I got out. They didn't. They deserve everything coming to them. Use this information to bring them home and make them pay." I forwarded it immediately to Detective Thornton. She called within minutes. "This is either incredibly valuable or an elaborate trap," she said. "We're verifying everything before acting on it." The verification took 2 days. Every piece of information checked out. The offshore accounts existed. The location information was accurate. The access codes worked. "Someone with inside knowledge gave you this," Detective Thornton concluded. "Possibly an accomplice who developed a conscience. Possibly someone else David betrayed. Either way, this is exactly what we needed." The offshore accounts contained $370,000. Not all the stolen money, but a substantial portion. And unlike the domestic accounts David had already emptied, these were full and accessible. Detective Thornton worked with federal authorities and international banking regulators to freeze the accounts immediately. David and Tracy couldn't access or move the money. "This recovery changes everything," Detective Thornton said. "We can now offer significant restitution to victims. Not full recovery, but substantial." At our next victim support group meeting, I shared the news. The room erupted in tears, cheers, and disbelief. Dorothy grabbed my hands. "I might get my money back? Some of it?" "We're working on it," I said. "The legal process will take time, but yes, there will be restitution." Walter looked stunned. "I never thought I'd see any of that money again. I'd accepted it was gone." "It's not over yet," I cautioned. "But it's progress. Real progress." That night, I sat alone in Greg's guest room, processing everything that had happened in 3 weeks. I'd come to Los Angeles expecting a family reunion. Instead, I'd discovered my son was a criminal, organized his victims into a support network, gone public with our stories, and helped recover hundreds of thousands of dollars. I thought about David in Mexico, watching his carefully constructed life collapse. Did he feel remorse? Or just anger at being caught? I thought about Martha, my late wife. What would she think of all this? She'd loved David fiercely. Would she be proud of me for fighting back? Or would she be heartbroken that I was working against our son? I wanted to believe she'd understand, that she'd see these victims and feel the same obligation I felt to help them. My phone buzzed. A text from my church in Phoenix. "We're proud of you, Bennett. You're showing real courage." Maybe that was enough. Maybe I couldn't control what David had become, but I could control how I responded. And I chose to respond with truth, community, and determination. The fight wasn't over, but we were winning. Mexican federal police arrested David and Tracy on a Wednesday morning. Detective Thornton called me with the news while I was having breakfast with Greg and Walter. "They've been taken into custody," she said. "The extradition process is starting. With the cooperation agreements already in place, they should be back in Los Angeles within 10 days. I felt no triumph, only exhaustion and a strange emptiness. My son was in handcuffs in a foreign country, and I'd helped put him there. Walter must have seen something in my face. "Second thoughts?" he asked gently. "No," I said, "just processing. He's still my son, even though I don't recognize him anymore." The news coverage was extensive. Video footage showed David and Tracy being led from their Mexico City hotel by federal agents. David's face was turned away from cameras, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the defeated slump of his posture. Tracy was crying, shouting about being innocent, claiming they'd done nothing wrong. The reporter mentioned the elder fraud investigation, the multiple victims, the hundreds of thousands of dollars stolen. They showed clips from our earlier interview, including my statement identifying myself as David's father. My phone rang constantly. Media requests for follow-up interviews, supportive messages from Phoenix, questions from curious strangers. I ignored most of it, too drained to engage. The extradition took 9 days. David and Tracy were transported back to Los Angeles and immediately arraigned. The charges were serious. 14 counts of elder fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, wire fraud, and identity theft. The district attorney's office had built an overwhelming case. They had the physical evidence from David's house, the computer files, the victim testimonies, the financial records, and the recovered offshore accounts. David and Tracy's bail was set at $500,000 each, which they couldn't pay with their assets frozen. They remained in custody. Detective Thornton asked if I wanted to visit David in jail. My first instinct was to refuse. What would I even say to him? But after a sleepless night, I changed my mind. I needed to see him face to face, needed some kind of closure, even if it was painful. The jail visit was arranged for a Thursday afternoon. I drove to the detention center, passed through security, and sat in the sterile visitation room waiting. David appeared on the other side of the glass partition, wearing an orange jumpsuit. He looked thinner, older, exhausted. He picked up the phone. I picked up mine. "Dad," he said. His voice was flat, empty. "David?" I replied. Silence stretched between us. I'd rehearsed things to say, questions to ask, but now all of it seemed inadequate. "Are you here to gloat?" David finally asked. "No. I'm here because you're my son, and I needed to see you." He laughed bitterly. "Some son, some father. What does that mean?" David leaned forward, his expression hardening. "You want to know why I did this? You really want to know?" "Yes. Because I watched you struggle my entire childhood. We were always broke, always counting pennies, always worried about bills. You worked 40 years as an accountant, and what did you have to show for it? A modest house, a used car, bargain brand, everything. I decided I'd never be like you. I'd never settle for barely scraping by." His words hit like physical blows, but I kept my voice steady. "We weren't rich, but we had enough. Your mother and I gave you a good life. We paid for your education, supported your dreams, taught you right from wrong. You taught me to be mediocre," David said coldly. "To accept whatever scraps life gave me. To be grateful for ordinary. I wanted more. So you stole from elderly people? Destroyed their security? That's your definition of more?" David shrugged. "They were naive, easy targets. They had money just sitting in accounts, doing nothing. I gave them opportunities they were stupid enough to believe." I stared at this stranger wearing my son's face. "You feel no remorse at all, do you? For what? For being smarter than them? For seeing opportunities they were too dumb to question?" "For hurting people," I said. "Walter Patterson lost his life savings. Dorothy Brennan lost her home. The Washingtons can't afford proper medication for Mr. Washington's Parkinson's. You did that. You deliberately targeted vulnerable people and destroyed their lives. They'll recover," David said dismissively. "Old people are resilient." The casual cruelty was staggering. "You planned to do the same thing to me. Your own father. You were going to steal my retirement savings and use me to scam my entire community." For the first time, something flickered in David's expression. Not guilt, but anger. "You ruined that. Going on TV, telling everyone, making me look weak. You humiliated me." "I made you look weak?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "David, you humiliated yourself. You committed crimes. You hurt innocent people. I just refused to help you hide it." "You could have walked away," David said. "Could have left town, pretended you never saw anything. But you had to play hero. Had to organize the victims, go to the media, help the police. You made this personal." "It was always personal," I said. "You made it personal when you planned to rob me and destroy my community." David slammed his hand on the counter. "Everything I did was to avoid becoming you. Stuck in the same boring life, the same boring town, with nothing to show for decades of work. I have plenty to show for my life. I said quietly. I have friends who trust me, a community that respects me, the memory of a wife who loved me, a clear conscience. What do you have, David? An orange jumpsuit and a prison cell. He glared at me, breathing hard. The saddest part, I continued, is that you had every opportunity to build a good life. You had education, intelligence, skills. You could have created something meaningful. Instead, you chose to prey on vulnerable people. That's not avoiding mediocrity. That's choosing evil. Get out, David said. I'll leave. But first, you need to hear this. Every victim you created is now part of a community that's stronger than your greed. They're healing, supporting each other, and warning others. Your crimes didn't just fail. They created something good, the exact opposite of what you intended. I said, get out. David hung up the phone and signaled the guard. I watched him leave the visitation room, shoulders rigid with anger. That was probably the last conversation I'd ever have with my son. There was no reconciliation here, no tearful apology, no Hollywood moment of realization and regret. David was who he'd chosen to be, and I had to accept that. Outside the detention center, I sat in my car for a long time. I'd hoped seeing David would provide closure. Instead, it had only confirmed what I already knew. The boy I'd raised was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize and couldn't reach. But maybe that was closure in itself. The acceptance that some people choose darkness, and you can't save them from themselves. A text came through from Greg. Prosecutor wants to meet with the victim group. Major update on the case. The meeting was scheduled for the next morning at the district attorney's office. All 23 identified victims attended, filling a conference room. The lead prosecutor, a sharp woman named Catherine Reeves, addressed us. First, thank you all for your cooperation and courage in coming forward. Your willingness to testify has made this case exceptionally strong. She clicked a remote, and a presentation appeared on the screen. We've received a cooperation offer from Tracy Bennett. Murmurs rippled through the room. Tracy's attorney has approached us with a deal, Catherine continued. She's willing to testify against David, provide detailed information about the full scope of his operations, and assist in recovering additional hidden assets. In exchange, she wants a significantly reduced sentence. Absolutely not, someone said angrily. She was part of this. Catherine raised her hand. I understand the anger. Tracy participated fully in these crimes. However, her cooperation could strengthen our case considerably and potentially help us recover more money. She's offering information about previous schemes in Arizona, additional victims we don't know about, and details on tax evasion and identity theft charges we couldn't prove otherwise. Dorothy raised her hand. What would her sentence be with this deal? 7 years with possibility of parole after 5, versus 15 to 20 years without the deal. The room erupted in debate. Some victims wanted Tracy to face maximum punishment. Others were more pragmatic. I raised my voice. Can I say something? The room quieted. I hate what Tracy did, I said. She helped David destroy lives. She deserves punishment, but we need to think practically. If her testimony helps convict David more completely, helps us recover more money, and helps identify other victims who need justice, isn't that worth considering? Walter stood up. Bennett's right. I want revenge. I want them both to rot in prison. But more than that, I want my money back. I want David locked away for as long as possible. If Tracy's deal accomplishes that, we should take it. Mrs. Washington spoke up. My husband needs medication. Revenge doesn't pay for his pills. If this deal helps us recover funds, I'm for it. Catherine waited for more comments. When none came, she said, I need to know if there are strong objections. This deal requires victim input. We took a vote. 18 people supported accepting Tracy's cooperation deal. 5 opposed. The majority carried. All right, Catherine said. We'll proceed with the cooperation agreement. Tracy will provide full testimony and assistance. In return, she'll receive a reduced sentence. Over the next 2 weeks, Tracy's debriefing provided a treasure trove of information. She detailed schemes David had run in Arizona 3 years earlier, before they moved to California. She identified 6 additional victims from that period. She revealed that David had been running similar scams for 5 years, starting small and growing more sophisticated. The total amount stolen over 5 years exceeded $700,000. She provided information that helped forensic accountants locate 2 more hidden accounts, recovering an additional $98,000. Most importantly, her testimony painted David as the architect and primary manipulator, strengthening the prosecution's case immensely. The trial was scheduled for 6 weeks later. Catherine Reeves walked us through what to expect. This will be difficult. Defense attorneys will try to discredit you, suggest you weren't really victims, imply you should have known better. They'll attack your judgment, your intelligence, your vulnerabilities. We can handle it, Helen Stiles said firmly. We've already gone public. We've already faced shame. Testifying is just the next step. When the trial began, the courtroom was packed. Media, supporters, curious onlookers. I sat with the victim group, all of us wearing blue ribbons we'd created as a symbol of unity. Tracy testified first, spending 3 days on the stand. She detailed every scheme, every tactic, every manipulation. She cried frequently, claiming she'd been under David's influence, that she'd been scared to refuse him. I didn't know if her remorse was genuine or performative, but her testimony was devastating to David's defense. Then came the victims. One by one, they took the stand and told their stories. Walter described his loneliness after his wife's death, how David and Tracy had seemed like genuine friends. Dorothy explained her grief and desire to honor her husband's memory. The Washingtons detailed the impact on their health and finances. Each testimony built a picture of systematic predation, of calculated manipulation, of lives deliberately destroyed for profit. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand and swore to tell the truth. Catherine Reeves asked me to introduce myself. My name is Bennett. I'm 67 years old, a retired accountant from Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm the defendant's father. The courtroom buzzed. Catherine continued, "Please tell the court how you became involved in this case." I told the entire story. The invitation to visit. Greg running across the lawn to warn me. Discovering the evidence in David's house. The dad phase. 2-folder. The Phoenix operation plans. Everything. Your own son was planning to steal from you? Catherine asked. Yes. And worse, he was planning to use my reputation and relationships to steal from my entire community. 47 people he'd researched and targeted. How did that make you feel? David's defense attorney objected. Relevance? The judge overruled. The witness may answer. Betrayed, I said. Devastated. Angry. But mostly, I felt responsible to warn others and help the people he'd already hurt. Catherine showed me copies of the files from David's house. I identified each one, explained what they contained, described the level of detailed planning that had gone into targeting each victim. During cross-examination, David's attorney tried to attack my credibility. Mr. Bennett, isn't it true that you and your son had a strained relationship? We hadn't seen each other in 2 years, if that's what you mean. And isn't it possible that your testimony is motivated by personal animosity rather than factual evidence? The evidence speaks for itself, I said calmly. The files, the computer records, the victim testimonies. My relationship with David is irrelevant to the facts of his crimes. But you've publicly spoken against him, organized his victims, worked closely with prosecutors. You have a bias. Yes, I'm biased toward justice for the people he hurt. I'm biased toward preventing future victims. If that's a flaw, I'll own it. The attorney tried several more angles, but I didn't waver. I'd prepared for this. The facts were on our side. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The defense's strategy was to claim David had been running legitimate investment opportunities that simply failed due to market conditions. They portrayed him as an unlucky entrepreneur, not a criminal. But the evidence was overwhelming. The systematic targeting of elderly victims, the fake business entities, the hidden offshore accounts, the detailed manipulation scripts. Tracy's testimony about deliberate fraud. When the verdict came, I was sitting between Walter and Dorothy, all of us holding hands. On count 1, elder fraud, we find the defendant guilty. The words continued, count after count. 14 counts total, guilty on every single one. David showed no reaction. He sat still, staring straight ahead. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Catherine Reeves prepared us. With the guilty verdict on all counts, David faces up to 30 years. I'll be recommending 18 years with no parole eligibility for 12. When sentencing day arrived, the judge allowed victim impact statements. Walter spoke first, describing how the theft had destroyed his independence. Dorothy explained losing her home. The Washingtons detailed their ongoing medical struggles. I spoke last. Your Honor, David Bennett is my son. I raised him, loved him, tried to teach him right from wrong. His crimes aren't just illegal acts. They're betrayals of everything I tried to instill in him. But more importantly, they're deliberate attacks on vulnerable people who deserved protection, not predation. I support the prosecutor's recommendation for maximum sentencing, not out of personal anger, but because these victims deserve justice and future potential victims deserve protection. The judge listened to everything, reviewed the evidence, then delivered her decision. Mr. Bennett, you've been convicted of 14 counts of elder fraud, along with conspiracy, money laundering, wire fraud, and identity theft. These crimes represent systematic, calculated predation on vulnerable members of our community. You showed no remorse, no empathy, no recognition of the harm you caused. Therefore, I sentence you to 18 years in federal prison with no eligibility for parole for 12 years. David was led away. I watched him go, feeling nothing but emptiness. Outside the courthouse, the victim group gathered. We'd won. Justice had been served. But victory felt hollow, complicated. It's not over yet, Catherine Reeves told us. Now comes restitution. The restitution process took 6 months. Forensic accountants worked with federal authorities to liquidate David's seized assets and distribute the recovered funds to victims. The offshore accounts, the hidden domestic accounts, David and Tracy's personal assets, everything was processed through bankruptcy court and allocated based on victim losses. In the end, victims recovered approximately 70% of their stolen money. Not complete restitution, but substantial. Dorothy received $28,000 back, 87% of her loss. She could afford a better apartment, restore some dignity to her living situation. She cried when the check arrived, calling me immediately. I never thought I'd see this money again, she said through tears. I can breathe again, Bennett. I can actually breathe. The Washingtons recovered $49,000. Mrs. Washington called to tell me they'd scheduled an appointment with Mr. Washington's neurologist to discuss better medications. We have options again, she said. Real treatment options. Walter got $38,000 back. He moved into a small condo, regaining the independence he'd lost. He still had dinner with Greg's family weekly, but now by choice, not necessity. Every victim I spoke with expressed similar relief. Not just about the money, though that mattered tremendously, but about the validation, the recognition that what happened to them was wrong, that justice had been served, that they hadn't been forgotten. I received a restitution check too, $31,000. I was classified as an intended victim since David had obtained my financial information illegally and planned the Phoenix scheme. The money felt strange in my hands. I hadn't actually lost anything, except my relationship with my son. I thought about it for days, then made a decision. I called Walter, Dorothy, and the Washingtons to a meeting at Greg's house. I want to create something, I told them. A fund dedicated to preventing elder fraud and supporting victims. Financial counseling, fraud awareness programs, support groups. I want to use my restitution money as seed funding, and I want to name it after my late wife, Martha, the Martha Bennett Elder Protection Fund. Dorothy started crying again. That's beautiful, but I can't do it alone, I continued. I need board members who understand what victims go through. People who can speak from experience. Walter straightened in his chair. I'm in. Me too, Dorothy said. The Washingtons looked at each other and nodded. Count us in. Over the next month, we established the fund as a nonprofit organization. We recruited volunteers, developed programs, created educational materials. We partnered with senior centers, churches, and community organizations in Los Angeles and Phoenix. The fund's first initiative was a series of fraud awareness workshops. I led most of them, starting each session the same way. My name is Bennett. I'm 68 years old, and my son is a convicted con artist serving 18 years in federal prison. I'm here to tell you that shame protects criminals and community protects us. The response was overwhelming. Seniors came to workshops hungry for information. Many shared their own near misses, times they'd almost been scammed, but something made them hesitate. We taught them to trust those instincts, to ask questions, to verify everything. We created a hotline for suspected fraud reports, a network of volunteer financial counselors who reviewed investment opportunities for free, support groups for fraud victims in multiple cities. The victim support group I'd originally organized continued meeting monthly. What had started as 8 people in Greg's living room had grown into a recognized advocacy organization. We lobbied for stronger elder fraud laws, worked with law enforcement on training programs, and supported legislation to protect vulnerable adults. 6 months after David's sentencing, I drove back to Phoenix. I'd been away for nearly 7 months, living between Los Angeles and various advocacy trips. It was time to go home. My church community welcomed me with open arms. No judgment, no whispered gossip about my criminal son, just support and respect for what we'd accomplished. The Sunday after my return, my pastor asked if I'd speak during the service. I agreed, though I was nervous. Standing before the congregation, I shared the whole story. The invitation to visit David, the shocking discovery, the victim organizing, the trial, the recovery. I thought family meant blood, I said, and loyalty meant silence. I was wrong. Family is the people who stand with you in truth. Loyalty to wrong behavior isn't love, it's enabling. Real love sometimes means letting consequences teach lessons we couldn't. I paused, looking at faces I'd known for 15 years. Friends who'd supported me through Martha's death, who'd checked on me during lonely holidays, who'd celebrated small joys and mourned losses with me. I lost a son, I continued, but I gained a community. I discovered that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the doorway to authentic connection. And I learned that even at 68 years old, you can choose who you become. David chose greed. I choose purpose. The congregation stood and applauded. Several people were crying. Afterwards, at least 20 people approached me with stories of their own near misses with scams, thanking me for raising awareness. An elderly woman named Margaret pulled me aside. Last month, someone approached me about an investment opportunity. It sounded perfect, everything I wanted, but I remembered your story from the news. I asked to see documentation, wanted time to review it, asked my daughter to look at it. The person got pushy, created urgency. I walked away, checked later and found out it was a scam. Your story saved me. That moment crystallized everything. One person protected, one family saved from financial devastation. That was victory enough. The Martha Bennett Elder Protection Fund continued growing. Within a year, we'd helped educate over 3,000 seniors across California and Arizona. We'd assisted 42 fraud victims with support and resources. We'd partnered with law enforcement agencies in 8 counties. Walter became the fund's treasurer, putting his engineering precision to work tracking every dollar. Dorothy led the victim support groups, her natural empathy creating safe spaces for healing. The Washingtons focused on medical advocacy, helping seniors navigate healthcare costs and avoid medical billing scams. Greg remained a close friend. His father's recovery, both financial and emotional, had been profound. Walter had started dating someone he'd met at a fraud awareness workshop, another survivor who understood his experience. I spent my retirement traveling between Phoenix and Los Angeles, speaking at workshops, developing programs, supporting victims. It wasn't the retirement I'd imagined, but it was meaningful in ways I'd never anticipated. Tracy was released after serving 5 years of her 7-year sentence, paroled for good behavior, and continued cooperation with fraud investigations. I never contacted her, and she never contacted me. Some bridges are too thoroughly burned to rebuild. David remained in federal prison. I received a letter from him 2 years after his sentencing. It was short, almost formal. He didn't apologize or express remorse. He simply stated that he'd be eligible for a prison education program and planned to get a degree in business management. The irony wasn't lost on me. Even in prison, David was planning his next move, still believing he could outsmart the system. I didn't write back. There was nothing left to say. But I kept the letter in a drawer, a reminder of what can happen when intelligence is divorced from empathy, when ambition lacks moral grounding, when someone chooses manipulation over connection. 3 years after that terrible day when Greg ran across the lawn to warn me, I stood in a community center in Phoenix, looking at 30 seniors attending a fraud prevention workshop. I was teaching them warning signs, red flags, community resources. An elderly man approached afterwards, thanking me for my honesty. "My wife almost got scammed last month," he said. "Someone approached her about an investment that sounded too good to be true. She remembered your story, the details you shared. She walked away. You saved us." I smiled, feeling Martha's presence somehow. She would have been proud of this, of turning pain into protection, of transforming betrayal into purpose. That's the lesson my son taught me, though not the way either of us expected. When someone you love chooses a destructive path, you can't save them from themselves, but you can refuse to participate in that destruction. You can choose truth over enabling, community over shame, purpose over despair. The greatest act of love is sometimes refusing to help someone continue hurting themselves and others. Setting boundaries isn't cruelty, it's wisdom. Standing up for victims isn't betrayal, it's integrity. I'm 68 years old now. I have a son serving time in federal prison, whom I may never see again. But I also have a community of survivors who've become family. I have purpose that fills my days with meaning. I have the satisfaction of knowing that my response to betrayal created something good. If you're facing betrayal from someone you love, know this: their choices don't define you. Your response does. Choose truth, choose community, choose healing over hiding. And understand that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to participate in someone's destruction of themselves and others. That's my story. That's my lesson. And that's my hope for anyone listening who needs to hear it. Have you or someone you know ever faced a situation where you had to choose between protecting someone you love and doing what was right? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking and subscribing to help us reach more people who might need to hear this message. Share this with anyone who might benefit from understanding elder fraud warning signs or the power of community healing. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, vulnerability is strength, truth is healing, and it's never too late to choose purpose over pain. Take care of yourselves and each other.